Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Peaked Panda. I'm an Apex content creator. I've been doing TikTok content now for about 2 years. And one of the first things that I notice when I type in my name in TikTok is Peaked Panda settings, gameplay, and Cronus. Well, one of the first things I can tell you is that I don't have a Cronus. I actually have a video up on my page that shows that I don't. And it is just amazing to me how little people understand how different settings in the game of Apex actually work. So today in this video, I'm going to be going over ALCs and specifically my ALCs, and explain to you how they work. But before we continue, please consider leaving a like as well as subscribe. It's completely free and it helps out the video. So one of my biggest pet peeves is that people on YouTube are constantly coming out with videos saying the best settings for season 16, season 15, season 14, and they actually get massive amounts of views. You should just understand this right now. There is no such thing as the best settings in Apex. It all comes down to what you are used to and what you are comfortable with. And the second thing you need to understand is that the default settings within the game are one-size-fits-all settings. ALCs, or advanced look control settings, are fine-tuned to you as a player. We all don't have the same thumbs, the same hands, the same movements with our fingers. We also don't have the same controllers. Some people have a default factory issue controller, some people have a custom controller with paddles. So why is everyone saying that certain default settings are better than the others? I have no idea. To me, if we all are different, we have different hands, we have different controllers, we should be using custom controls for our specific situation. And that, my friends, is where advanced look controls, or ALCs, come into play. These settings allow you to tweak everything from how fast you look up and down, left and right, to how fast you can turn around, to everything from the dead zone inside your controller to the outer bounding box of the joystick. Quite literally, any little detail that you want to change in your performance in the game can be done in here. And specifically, we are looking at my ALC settings here right now. And I know this can be very overwhelming at first, especially with all the jargon that they put in here. But I am here to simplify the explanation of what each setting does and how it impacts your controls in the game. So the very first thing that you want to look at is your dead zone, outer threshold, and response curve. These three settings are what's going to affect your recoil control of most guns the most. This is a chart that represents your joystick. The center crosshair is where your dead zone is applied. And dead zone is just a little tiny circle of negative space where there's no sensitivity in your joystick at all. The purpose for adding dead zone is to get rid of stick drift, which a lot of controllers unfortunately come with. You want to get your dead zone as close to 0 as possible. Too high of a dead zone can make your game feel like it's unresponsive, and this is especially detrimental when you're trying to control the recoil of your gun. Next up is the outer threshold, and the outer threshold is represented in this chart by the little orange circle on the inside of the larger circle. This is just the area where all the movement is registered on the joystick. I currently have mine at 6%. Most people have it anywhere from 1% or 2%. So then why is mine so high? Well, I have raised joysticks that are a lot higher than your standard joysticks. Remember what I said earlier about people having different controllers? This is a good example. My thumbsticks were just a little bit too high, so I wanted to restrict the maximum amount of area my controller could register movement. Just a tiny bit, because the joysticks were just a little bit too high for me. But who knows, someone with smaller hands and a shorter range of motion may want to turn up the outer threshold as well, because they just can't move their thumb around that much. And that's what outer threshold is for, restricting the range of motion that your joystick registers movement. Next up, we have response curve. Sorry in advance for my big old fat name taking up half the screen. I have a lot of other socials. Fight me about it. The best way to describe response curve is it's just a setting that dulls down your mid-range motions of your joystick. The Y in the response curve graph represents your sensitivity range, from making small movements to using your max sensitivity and swinging around wildly. And the X-axis represents your joystick position. Is it dead center or is it all the way cranked to the side? The most common question that I get asked in my stream is, what is a classic response curve versus a linear response curve? Well, the classic respawn response curve is actually a 10 in your ALC settings. And a linear response curve, which is just a literal straight line graph, is 0. So what does this mean? All adding a response curve does is it slows down your sensitivity just a little bit in your mid-range motions of your joystick movement. If you have it on linear, it's consistent through your mid-range, your small range, and all the way to your maximum range of movement on your joystick. You got those fingers that are super precise and ladies love you for it, you know what I mean? Think of a response curve as a margin of error for your movement in your fingers. If you're not that precise with your fingers, then you may want to turn up the response curve. I currently have my response curve set at a 6, which is kind of the middle point between between linear and actual classic response curve. Having too high of a response curve can make your game feel really dull when you're trying to move and aim. But having it too low, any little movement you make can feel too twitchy, and you might not be able to control it. The next few are just pretty basic. It's yaw, pitch, turning extra yaw, and turning extra pitch. Yaw and pitch is just simply up, down, and left and right. Yaw is your left to right motion, and pitch is your up and down motion. I have my non-ADS sensitivity set at even across the board between yaw and pitch, and I simply have it at that because I like my movement to be consistent when I'm running around. If I'm wall jumping or if I'm taking up a zip line and looking around, I want to make sure that my speed and motion in my joystick when I'm doing that is consistent throughout, and I'm not looking up faster than I'm looking left to right. My ADS yaw speed is actually higher than my ADS pitch speed, and that's just because of tracking from left to right when people are strafing. Sometimes people are doing crazy shit in game, and I want to make sure that I'm able to track them from left to right, you know what I mean? Turning extra yaw and pitch for ADS and non-ADS is simply extra sensitivity added on top of your sensitivity already when your joystick is at maximum bounding area for movement. If someone's shooting me in the back, I want to be able to turn around as quickly as possible. Now, you may have already noticed that my turning extra pitch and speed are the same on my ADS and non-ADS. Non-ADS makes sense, right? Because my non-ADS sensitivity is already even, so applying extra turning yaw and pitch and making it even for my non-ADS just makes sense. But why is it even for my ADS? Well, you have to remember, anything that you put in turning extra yaw and pitch is added on top of what your sensitivity is already. So if I like the way that my sensitivity feels between a 120 and an 80, let's say for example, I don't want to suddenly crank it up between 500 and 300. It's going to feel weird. I'm going to be off. Put it this way, if you were to have a 4.3 sensitivity and you're turning extra pitch and yaw and made it between 8 and 5, well, you're gonna feel weird. Your aim's gonna be weird. So making sure that those turning extras are even is very important, especially once you nail down your base sensitivity settings. Next up, we have ramp up time and ramp up delay. And honestly, no one really knows what these do. They always just put them at 0 whenever they give their ALC settings. Think of ramp up time as acceleration in a car. Are you going 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, or are you going 0 to 60 in 18 seconds? Adding ramp up time gives it a gradual movement to that extra turning you want applied instead of an instant one. So again, are you going 0 to 60 in 5 seconds? Or are you going 0 to 60 in 18? That's your choice. And a delay is simply a delay. Think of a car again. The time between you lifting up your foot and actually pressing the gas pedal is the delay. If someone has really twitchy thumbs, they may want to add a delay so as not to mess up their movement. I used to have a delay on, but I removed it eventually because I wanted more instantaneous movement. And per optic settings are just whatever your sensitivity is and multiply it per the optic that you have on a gun. 1 times optics I usually keep about the same. 2 times optics I crank up just a little bit, and 3 times optics I have up much higher because I'm usually putting them on assault rifle, so again I want my tracking to be consistent. This is all just personal preference, but your 1 times optics is usually what you're basing your ADS sensitivity off of, so you usually want that the same. Anything higher than a 1 times is completely up to you. And that basically covers ALCs. Now, if you're wondering at this point, where should I start at? What does my conversion look like from my normal default settings over to ALC settings? Well, luckily we do have that conversion chart. Here is the chart that converts your default sensitivities over to ALC settings. Now remember, when you change your ALCs, you're not going to get used to them straight away. Play around with them, test them out, keep them on for about a week to 2 weeks. And are ALCs needed for everyone? Do the default settings work just as well? Of course they do. If you're more used to the default settings by now, please stick with them. But if you want to really fine-tune your aim and your movement and everything that you do in-game in Apex, ALCs are definitely for you, especially if you notice that you're just slightly off half the time. Because trust me, once you dial in those settings for your ALCs, you're going to absolutely fry, and those are going to be specific to you. And those are actually the best settings in Apex. I think I'm supposed to have like an outro tagline or something around here, right? Yeah? Okay, let's just give it a shot. Stay in school, kids, and don't do drugs. See you next time.